Why was she reading a letter from a dead man at 5 in the morning? The paper felt like skin against her fingers, weathered, creased from 1,000 readings. The ink had faded over 33 years, but the words still cut like broken glass. Captain Declan Brennan had written it in a tent somewhere in the Saudi desert, February 1991, 6 days before his FA-18 would spiral into the Kuwaiti sand in a ball of fire and twisted metal. His handwriting was steady. No tremor, no hesitation. The mark of a man who'd made peace with his death before it came for him. Kira, you're 6 months old now. If you're reading this, I didn't make it home. Lieutenant Commander Kira Brennan stood in the pre-dawn darkness of Camp Pendleton, California. October 2024, her father's words echoing in a mind that hadn't slept properly in 3 years. She folded the letter back into her jacket pocket, the same pocket where she kept her sealed trident, the same pocket where she kept the dog tags of a man she'd killed with her bare hands. The sun hadn't broken the horizon yet. The Pacific fog rolled in thick and cold off the coast, turning the base into a landscape of shadows and amber security lights. Somewhere in the distance, a drill instructor's voice cut through the morning stillness, already breaking down some fresh-faced recruit who thought he was tough enough for this life. Kira knew better. Toughness didn't mean anything if you couldn't control it. She'd learned that lesson in blood. Your mother will raise you strong. I'm counting on that. But I need you to remember something, and I need you to remember it forever. Strength without wisdom destroys. The words played on repeat in her head as she approached the main gate. Chain link and concrete, floodlights casting hard shadows, an MP booth with bulletproof glass, and a Marine who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else at 5:30 on a Monday morning. She handed over her orders without a word. The Marine scanned them, his eyes flicking from the paper to her face and back again, lingering on the rank insignia at her collar. Lieutenant Commander, Navy female. The trifecta of things that didn't quite compute in his early morning brain. He waved her through without comment. Smart kid. The admin building squatted at the center of the base like a concrete toad, all hard angles and government tissue ugliness. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed with that particular frequency designed to give you a headache and destroy your will to live. A clerk sat behind a desk that had probably been manufactured sometime around the Korean War, surrounded by filing cabinets that predated the invention of the computer. Lieutenant Commander Brennan, reporting as ordered. The clerk didn't even glance up, just pushed a clipboard across the desk. Sign in. Building 3, Office 214. Colonel Garrett's expecting you. Kira signed. The pen was chained to the desk, of course it was. She found Building 3 without difficulty, climbed stairs that echoed with the hollow sound of government construction, walked down a hallway that smelled like floor wax and old coffee. Office 214 had a frosted glass door with black stenciled letters. C.R. Garrett, Base Commander. She knocked twice, sharp, military. Enter. The voice that answered was gravel and cigarette smoke, the kind of voice that came from 30 years of shouting orders into desert wind. Colonel Richard Garrett looked like he'd been carved from the same concrete as his building. 55 years old, hair gone gray at the temples, face lined with the particular kind of exhaustion that came from fighting bureaucracy instead of enemies. He stood, offered his hand. His grip was firm, professional, the handshake of a man who'd learned early that respect wasn't automatic. Thank you for coming, sir. Kira shook his hand, noted the calluses, the slight tremor that suggested too much coffee and not enough sleep. My orders said training evaluation, but the classification level suggests there's more to it than that. Garrett's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. You're direct, I appreciate that. Sit down, Commander, we need to talk and we don't have much time. Kira sat. The chair was uncomfortable, probably by design. Keep people from getting too relaxed, too comfortable, too willing to waste time. Garrett reached into a drawer and pulled out a file folder. Red stripe across the top. Classified. He slid it across the desk. Before you open that, I need you to understand something. What you're about to see doesn't officially exist. This conversation isn't happening. And if anyone asks, you're here for exactly what your orders say. Routine training evaluation. Kira opened the folder. The photograph stared up at her with dead eyes. A young man, maybe 19, 20 at most, baby-faced. The kind of kid who probably enlisted thinking he'd find glory and brotherhood and all the things the recruiters promised. Instead, he'd found a metal slab in the base morgue. Private First Class Dylan Chambers, Garrett said, his voice flat, emotionless. The voice of a man delivering bad news he delivered too many times before. 19 years old, from Augusta, Georgia, found dead in Bay 3 training facility on September 4th. Official cause of death, accidental cervical fracture sustained during grappling training. Kira studied the photograph. The kid had a good smile in his service photo. Genuine. The kind of smile that belonged on a kid heading to college, not a corpse heading to a funeral. "You don't believe it was an accident," she said. "No." Garrett pulled out another photograph. This one showed the body, clinical and horrible. The neck bent at an angle that made Kira's stomach clench. The medical examiner ruled it accidental, but the ME is young, inexperienced, and very susceptible to pressure from people with more rank than sense. Someone pressured him to rule it accidental. Someone. Garrett's jaw tightened. Dylan's father is Sergeant First Class Robert Chambers, retired now. He was my radio operator in Mogadishu, 93. When our convoy got hit and half my team went down, Chambers dragged me 200 meters under fire with a bullet in his leg and his radio shot to pieces. Saved my life. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes, looked at it, put it back in the drawer. Trying to quit, not succeeding. I owe him the truth about his son, the real truth, not some sanitized report designed to protect someone's career. Kira closed the folder, but she couldn't close out the image of that broken neck. She'd seen enough death to know what violence looked like. And this wasn't training. This was rage. "Why me?" she asked. "You've got investigators, MPs, JAG. Why pull in a SEAL for a training death investigation?" Garrett leaned back in his chair, studying her with eyes that had seen through too many lies to miss one now. "Because you know the difference between an accident and murder. Because you won't be intimidated by rank or reputation. And because you have a very personal understanding of what happens when training goes wrong." The air in the office suddenly felt too thin. Kira's hand moved unconsciously to her jacket pocket, where her father's letter rested next to her trident, next to the memory of a throat collapsing under her hand, of eyes going wide with shock and fear, of blood on her knuckles and a voice screaming for a medic who would arrive too late. June 2012. Bud S. Training Facility. Petty Officer Travis Holden, 29 years old, drunk on power and testosterone. His hands on seaman recruit Jessica Palmer, 18 years old and frozen with fear. Kira had intervened, verbally, professionally, by the book. Holden had shoved her, hard. And Kira's training had taken over. Muscle memory, years of combat conditioning, she'd struck back, once precise, lethal. The tribunal had ruled it justified. Self-defense. Holden had been drunk, aggressive, dangerous. The investigation had revealed a pattern of abuse, other victims, other complaints that had been buried. But justified didn't mean innocent. And 3 years later, Kira still saw his face when she closed her eyes. "I know what you did in 2012, Garrett said quietly. "I know why you carry those dog tags. I know what it cost you." Kira met his gaze, steady, unflinching. "Then you know I won't let another kid die because someone with rank decided training is an excuse for murder." Garrett nodded slowly. "That's why you're here, Commander. Dylan Chambers deserves justice, and you're the only person I trust to get it for him." But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. Who killed Dylan Chambers? The The question echoed through her mind as she stood in the entrance of Bay 3. The training facility smelled like sweat and rubber mats and something else. Something darker. Fear, maybe. Or violence that had soaked into the walls over years of brutal conditioning. The lights flickered on, harsh fluorescence that turned everything clinical and cold. The main training area stretched out before her, 30 meters by 40, padded mats covering the floor, heavy bags hanging from ceiling chains, a boxing ring in the corner, weights and equipment lining the walls. And blood, not visible, not anymore, but Kira could feel it, the psychic residue of what had happened here, of a 19-year-old kid whose neck had been snapped like kindling. "Can I help you?" The voice came from behind her, deep, aggressive, the kind of voice that was used to being obeyed without question. Kira turned slowly, deliberately, making it clear she wasn't startled, wasn't intimidated. The man standing in the doorway was massive, 6'4", maybe 240, muscles on muscles, neck like a tree trunk, hands that looked like they could crush skulls. He wore PT gear with sergeant stripes and an instructor badge. His face was all hard angles and cold eyes. The face of a man who'd learned that violence solved problems and never bothered to learn any other solutions. "Sergeant Riker Donovan," Kira said, not a question, a statement. She'd memorized the file on the drive over. Lead instructor, Bay 3, 23 years in the Corps, multiple combat deployments, 17 confirmed kills in Fallujah, and a pattern of complaints from students that had been systematically ignored. "That's right," Donovan moved closer, slow, predatory. "And you are?" "Lieutenant Commander Brennan, Navy Special Warfare. I'm here for a training evaluation." "Navy?" He said it like it tasted bad. "We don't need Navy brass evaluating Marine training. We've been doing this for 200 years without your help." Kira smiled, no warmth in it. "Then you should be pretty good at it by now. Funny how that 19-year-old kid still ended up dead." Donovan's jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists. Chambers was weak, couldn't handle the training. "That's not on me, that's on him." "Really?" Kira pulled out Dylan's file, opened it. Because his pre-training physical shows he was in excellent condition, top of his class in basic, high aptitude scores, no prior injuries, no medical red flags, kid was healthy as a horse. She looked up, met Donovan's eyes, until someone snapped his neck during what was officially logged as low-intensity grappling drills. "Accidents happen. Not like this, they don't." The air between them crackled with tension. Kira could feel the violence radiating off Donovan like heat off asphalt. He wanted to hurt her, wanted to put her in her place, wanted to remind her that rank meant nothing when you were standing on his mat in his facility. "You questioning my training methods, Commander?" "I'm questioning how a healthy kid ends up with a cervical fracture that looks more like execution than training." Donovan took another step closer. "Careful, you're making accusations that could get you in a lot of trouble." "Only if they're not true." They stood 3 feet apart, eye to eye, predator to predator, and Kira realized something that made her blood run cold. Donovan wasn't afraid, wasn't nervous, wasn't concerned about her investigation at all. Because he'd done this before, and he'd gotten away with it before. She thought about the file Garrett had given her, the complaints that had been buried, the pattern of injuries among Donovan's students that were always explained away as training accidents, the culture of fear that kept Marines from speaking up because they knew it would only make things worse. Dylan Chambers hadn't been Donovan's first victim. He was just the first one who died. "Tell me about that day," Kira said, her voice calm, professional. "September 4th, walk me through what happened." Donovan shrugged. Standard grappling session. Chambers was sparring with another Marine, lost his balance, fell wrong, heard the snap, called the medics immediately. They pronounced him dead on scene. "Who was he sparring with?" "Private Rodriguez." "Where's Rodriguez now?" Transferred 2 weeks ago, Camp Lejeune. Convenient. Standard rotation. Kira made a mental note. Rodriguez would need to be interviewed, but getting access to him would take time. Time she might not have if Garrett's warning was accurate. This investigation had a short window before someone with more rank and less scruples shut it down to protect Donovan and the reputation of the training program. She walked across the mat, slow, studying the space, looking for anything that might tell her what really happened. The mats were clean, too clean, recently replaced maybe. No blood stains, no evidence. But the walls told a different story. Scuff marks from bodies being thrown. Dents in the padding from impacts that were too hard, too violent, too far beyond what training required. "You run a hard program," she said. "Marines need to be hard. There's a difference between hard training and abuse." Donovan laughed, cold, mirthless. "That's what's wrong with the military now. Too soft, too worried about feelings. My instructors beat the weakness out of me, made me a warrior. I do the same for my Marines." "Your instructors didn't kill you." "No, they made me strong enough that nobody could." Kira turned to face him. "Dylan Chambers was strong. You just didn't like that he wouldn't break for you." Something flickered in Donovan's eyes. Rage, pure and simple. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Kira stepped closer. "I've seen men like you before. Power-tripping bullies who hide behind rank and call it leadership. You needed Chambers to submit, to bow down, to acknowledge that you were stronger, but he wouldn't, would he? He was insubordinate. He stood up to you." "Same thing." "No, it's really not." The silence stretched between them. Dangerous, volatile. Kira could feel the violence building. Could feel Donovan calculating whether he could get away with putting his hands on a Navy commander in the middle of a Marine base. She almost wanted him to try. "You know what I think," Kira said quietly. "I think you lost your temper. I think Chambers said something or did something that made you feel small, and you couldn't handle it. So you grabbed him, put him in a hold he couldn't escape from, applied pressure until you heard that snap, and then you called it training." Donovan's face went red. "You're way out of line." "Am I?" "You need to leave, now, before I have you escorted off base." Kira smiled again. That same cold smile. "Go ahead, call security. I'm sure Colonel Garrett would love to hear why you're interfering with his investigation." Donovan's hands trembled, not with fear, with rage barely contained. "This is my facility, my rules, and you don't belong here. Neither did Dylan Chambers after you broke his neck." Donovan moved fast, faster than Kira expected for a man his size. His hand shot out, grabbing for her shoulder, aggressive, threatening, testing to see if she'd back down. Kira didn't move, didn't flinch, just looked at his hand on her shoulder, then up at his face. "You sure you want to do that, Sergeant?" For the first time, something like uncertainty crossed Donovan's face, because he'd expected her to pull away, to step back, to show fear, and instead she'd stood absolutely still, looking at him with eyes that had seen more death than he could imagine, eyes that weren't afraid of him at all. He removed his hand slowly. "This conversation is over." "No," Kira said, "it's just getting started." She walked toward the door, stopped, turned back. "One more thing, Sergeant. I'm not like the other investigators who came through here. I'm not afraid of your reputation. I'm not impressed by your combat record. And I'm not going away until I know exactly what happened to Dylan Chambers." She paused. "Let that sink in. And if I find out you killed him, all your rank and your muscles and your tough guy routine won't save you from what comes next." She walked out into the California sunlight. Behind her, Riker Donovan stood alone in his facility, in his kingdom of violence and control. And for the first time in 23 years, he felt something he hadn't felt since he was a boot camp private getting his face pushed into the dirt. He felt afraid. What happens when warriors forget they're supposed to protect, not dominate? The question haunted her as she sat in the base library 3 hours later, surrounded by file folders and incident reports, and the bureaucratic paper trail of a system that had failed Dylan Chambers long before Riker Donovan snapped his neck. Coffee had gone cold in a styrofoam cup beside her laptop. Her eyes burned from reading dense military documentation written in the particular language, designed to obscure truth rather than reveal it. She'd spent the morning pulling training records from Bay 3, 5 years' worth. What she'd found made her want to put her fist through a wall. 47 Marines injured during Donovan's tenure as lead instructor. 47. Broken bones, concussions, torn ligaments, dislocated joints, and every single injury report followed the same pattern: training accident, no fault assigned, recommendations for improved safety protocols that were never implemented. 47 Marines who'd learned that reporting abuse meant nothing, meant being labeled weak, meant being targeted even harder by an instructor who knew the system would protect him. And nobody had stopped it. Not the base commander before Garrett, not the training oversight committee, not the Marines who witnessed the abuse but stayed silent because speaking up meant becoming the next victim. Dylan Chambers had been number 48. But he'd been different. According to the statements Kira had managed to pull from reluctant witnesses, Dylan hadn't just endured Donovan's brutality. He challenged it, called it out, refused to participate in the degradation of weaker Marines, stood between Donovan and other victims. He tried to be a hero, and heroes got killed. Commander Brennan. The voice pulled her out of her thoughts. Kira looked up to see a young Marine standing hesitantly at the edge of her table, maybe 22, 23, nervous, scared, looking around like he expected someone to catch him talking to her. "Yes, I'm Lance Corporal Marcus Webb. I trained with Dylan. I was there the day he died." Kira's attention sharpened. "Sit down, Webb." He sat, his hands were shaking. He kept glancing at the door like he wanted to run. "You don't have to be afraid," Kira said quietly. "Whatever you tell me stays between us." "That's not true," Webb said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Nothing stays secret on this base. If Donovan finds out I talked to you, I'm next." "Donovan's not going to touch you." "You can't promise that." He was right, she couldn't. "Tell me what happened," Kira said. "Tell me the truth." Webb closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet with tears he was trying hard not to shed. "Dylan was my friend, my best friend since boot camp. We went through everything together, and he was good, you know. Not just good at training, good as a person. He didn't let Donovan turn him into something mean and hard. He stayed himself. And Donovan didn't like that. Donovan hated it. He kept pushing Dylan harder, longer training sessions, more brutal exercises, trying to break him. But Dylan wouldn't break. He just kept showing up, kept being kind to the weaker guys, kept calling out Donovan when he went too far. The day he died, what happened? Webb's hands clenched into fists. Donovan called it a surprise drill, said we needed to learn to fight when we were exhausted. He'd already run us through 3 hours of hell. We were destroyed, could barely stand. And then he said we were doing grappling, full contact, no protective gear. Kira leaned forward. "Keep going." Donovan picked Dylan, said he needed a demonstration partner. Dylan knew something was wrong. I could see it in his eyes, but he stepped up anyway because that's who he was. He never backed down. Webb's voice broke. Donovan put him in a rear naked choke, standard submission hold. Dylan tapped out. "You're supposed to release when someone taps. That's the rule. That's how you don't kill people." But Donovan didn't release. No, he held on. Dylan was fighting, trying to break free, and Donovan just kept squeezing. We were all yelling at him to stop, but he didn't. He looked right at us and he smiled. And then we heard the crack. The library was silent, except for Webb's ragged breathing. Dylan dropped like a puppet with its strings cut, just collapsed. Donovan acted shocked, called for medics, started doing CPR even though we all knew Dylan was already gone. And then he looked at all of us and he said, "Training accident. Chambers lost consciousness and fell wrong. That's what you saw, that's what you'll tell the investigators." And everyone did. Webb nodded, tears streaming down his face now. We were scared. Donovan made it clear that if anyone talked, they'd end up like Dylan, and the system backed him up. The ME ruled it accidental. The investigation was closed in 3 days, and we all learned that the truth doesn't matter. Power matters, and Donovan has all the power. Kira reached across the table and put her hand on Webb's shoulder. Not anymore, he doesn't. Webb looked at her with eyes full of hope and fear in equal measure. You really think you can take him down? He's got friends in high places, people who protect him because they train the same way. They think what he does makes strong Marines. What he does makes dead Marines. I know that, you know that, but they don't care. Kira pulled out her phone. I'm going to record your statement, official, on the record. Are you willing to do that? Webb hesitated, his whole body trembling, making a choice that could end his career or save his life. Finally, he nodded. Yeah, I'll do it, for Dylan. They spent the next 2 hours going through every detail. Webb's statement was comprehensive, damning, and corroborated by text messages he'd saved where other Marines had discussed what really happened. It was enough to reopen the investigation, enough to bring charges. But it wasn't enough to convict, not against someone like Donovan, not without more evidence. When Webb left, Kira sat alone in the empty library and thought about her father's letter, about strength and wisdom, about the difference between warriors who protected and warriors who destroyed. Donovan was a warrior who'd forgotten what he was fighting for, who'd let violence become his identity instead of his tool, who'd confused domination with leadership and cruelty with strength. She'd seen it before, in Holden, in other men who'd worn the uniform but lost their way, men who thought power meant never showing restraint, never admitting weakness, never acknowledging that sometimes the strongest thing you could do was choose not to hurt someone. Her phone buzzed, text from Garrett. Donovan's lawyers are already pushing back. They know you're building a case. Be careful. Kira stared at the message. Donovan was preparing for a legal fight, which meant he knew she was a threat, which meant he might do something stupid. Or something calculated. She thought about the way he'd looked at her in Bay 3, the rage, the contempt, the absolute certainty that he was untouchable. Men like that didn't go down easy. They fought. They destroyed evidence. They intimidated witnesses. They used every trick and every connection and every ounce of institutional power to protect themselves. But Kira had something Donovan didn't have. She had nothing left to lose. The tribunal after Holden's death had taken everything, her peace of mind, her certainty, her belief that the system worked. She'd killed a man who deserved it and still carried the weight every single day, still saw his face, still felt his throat collapse under her hand. If taking down Donovan meant facing another tribunal, another investigation, another round of questioning her judgment and her methods, then so be it. Dylan Chambers deserved justice. And Kira was going to get it for him. Even if it cost her everything. Why would a Navy SEAL spend 25 years studying karate? The answer was waiting for her in a photograph she'd been avoiding since she opened Garrett's file. A black and white image from 1999. Young Kira Brennan, maybe 14 years old, standing in a dojo wearing a gi and a nervous smile. And next to her, a man with kind eyes and weathered hands. Master Chief Gary Callahan, Force Recon, Vietnam veteran, and one of the highest-ranked martial artists in the Marine Corps. Her father's best friend, the man who'd promised to look after her when Declan Brennan's FA-18 went down over Kuwait. The man who'd taught her that strength without wisdom was just violence waiting to happen. Kira hadn't thought about Callahan in months. He'd retired from active service years ago, moved to Oregon, opened a small dojo where he taught classical martial arts to kids and veterans. She'd meant to visit, meant to thank him for everything he'd given her. But life had gotten in the way. Deployments, missions, the incident with Holden that had consumed 3 years of her life. Now, sitting in her temporary quarters on Pendleton, she pulled up his number and stared at it for a long time before pressing call. He answered on the second ring. "This is Callahan." "Master Chief, it's Kiera." Silence, then a laugh, warm, genuine. "Little Kiera Brennan, not so little anymore, I hear. Lieutenant Commander, your old man would be proud. I need your help." The warmth in his voice didn't fade, but something else entered it. Concern, understanding. "You're at Pendleton. You're investigating Dylan Chambers." Kiera sat up straight. "How did you know?" "Because I trained Riker Donovan 20 years ago, and I've been waiting for this phone call ever since." The world tilted slightly. "You trained him?" "Yeah, when he was young and angry and convinced that violence was the only language worth speaking. I tried to teach him something different, tried to show him that martial arts wasn't about domination. It was about discipline, control, understanding when to fight and when to walk away." Callahan sighed. "I failed." "Master Chief." "No, Kira, let me say this. Donovan had potential, real skill, but he had something else too, something dark. He needed to hurt people, needed to feel powerful, and every technique I taught him he twisted into something cruel. He'd use joint locks past the point of submission, apply chokes past the point of unconsciousness, justify it as making his partners tougher. But it was never about training. It was about feeding something sick inside him." Kira thought about Dylan Chambers' broken neck, about the smile on Donovan's face when he kept squeezing. "Why didn't you stop him?" "I tried, reported him to his command, but I was just an instructor. He was a decorated combat veteran. Nobody wanted to hear that their war hero was a sadist, so they buried my complaints, transferred him to different units, let him keep doing what he was doing because it was easier than confronting the truth. And now a kid is dead. Yeah, and I carry that every day because I knew what Donovan was and I couldn't stop him." Kira closed her eyes. "I'm going to stop him now." "I know you are. That's why I'm coming to Pendleton. I'll be there tomorrow morning." "Master Chief, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Dylan Chambers died because I failed to do my job 20 years ago. I'm not failing again." His voice hardened. "And Kira, there's something you need to understand. Donovan's not just dangerous. He's skilled, really skilled. If he feels cornered, if he thinks you're going to take him down, he might come at you directly, and he'll use everything I taught him to do it. Then I'll be ready." "Will you?" Callahan asked quietly. "Because Donovan's got 23 years of Marine Corps combatives training, multiple black belts. He's 6'4", 240 and mean as a snake. Most people who challenge him end up in the hospital, or the morgue." "I'm not most people." "No, you're not, but you've been out of practice. When's the last time you sparred, really sparred, not tactical drills, not combat scenarios, pure martial arts?" Kira thought about it. "Months, maybe longer, since before Holden, since before everything fell apart." "Too long," she admitted. "Then we're going to fix that, tomorrow, 0500. There's a gym off base. I'll text you the address. Bring your gi, bring your focus. And Kira," he paused, "bring your father's letter. You're going to need to remember why you're doing this." He hung up. Kira sat in the darkness of her quarters and thought about what was coming, about facing Donovan, about what it would take to bring him down, about whether she was still the woman Callahan had trained all those years ago or if Holden's death had broken something inside her that couldn't be fixed. Her phone buzzed again, text from an unknown number. "You should leave Pendleton while you still can. Some investigations aren't worth your life." No signature, but she didn't need one. Donovan's message was clear. He knew she was coming for him, and he was ready to fight back. Kira looked at the text for a long moment, then deleted it, stood up, pulled her gi out of her bag. The white cotton was worn soft from years of training, stained with sweat and blood and the evidence of 1,000 sparring sessions where she'd learned that pain was just information and control was everything. She held the gi up to the light and remembered being 14 years old in Callahan's dojo, learning her first kata, struggling to understand why they spent so much time on breathing and balance and stillness when all she wanted to do was hit things. A warrior who can't control herself is just a dangerous child, Callahan had told her. Strength is easy. Any fool with muscles can throw a punch. But wisdom, control, knowing when to strike and when to hold back, that's what separates warriors from murderers. She'd carried those words through her first deployment, through every mission where she'd had to make the choice between violence and restraint, through the night with Holden when control had failed and she'd killed a man because her training took over and her wisdom arrived too late. Tomorrow, she'd train with Callahan again, reconnect with the discipline that had saved her life dozens of times, remember what it meant to be a warrior instead of just a weapon. And then she'd face Donovan. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with the understanding that some predators needed to be stopped, some monsters needed to be put down, not because violence solved problems, but because sometimes it was the only language left that would protect the innocent from those who'd forgotten what honor meant. Kira folded her gi carefully, placed it on her bed, pulled out her father's letter and read it one more time. Strength without wisdom destroys. Strength with wisdom builds. Build something that lasts, Kira. Build something I'd be proud of. Tomorrow she'd start building. What does it feel like to face your master's greatest failure? The gym was a converted warehouse on the edge of Oceanside. Concrete floor, high ceilings, bare walls. The kind of place where serious people came to do serious work without the distractions of mirrors and motivational posters. Kira arrived at 4:50 in the morning. Callahan was already there, moving through a kata with the fluid precision of someone who'd performed the movements 10,000 times. His hair had gone completely gray. His face was more lined. But his body moved with the same controlled power she remembered from childhood. He finished the kata and turned to face her. "You're early." "So are you." Couldn't sleep, kept thinking about Donovan, about all the ways I should have stopped him before he got to this point. Callahan gestured to the empty floor. "But that's not why we're here. We're here to make sure you're ready for what's coming." Kira dropped her bag and started stretching. "How bad is he?" "Bad? He's got a 5th-degree black belt in Marine Corps martial arts, 3rd degree in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He trains every day, competes regionally, wins more than he loses. And he's mean. Uses techniques that are technically legal but ethically questionable, cranks submissions too hard, strikes after the bell. The kind of fighter who justifies everything by saying combat doesn't have rules." "But he's never faced a SEAL." Callahan smiled, thin. "No, he hasn't. And that's going to be his first mistake, because he's going to underestimate you. He's going to see a woman with a Navy rank and assume you're some paper pusher who doesn't know how to fight. He won't realize you've spent 15 years learning to kill people quietly. Won't know that you've trained in Krav Maga and Muay Thai and classical Japanese Jiu-Jitsu on top of everything I taught you." "Will it be enough?" "Depends. How much do you remember?" Kira moved into a ready stance. "Let's find out." They spent the next 3 hours training, starting slow with kata to rebuild her muscle memory, then progressing to partner drills, then to full contact sparring that left both of them sweating and breathing hard and remembering why they'd chosen this path decades ago. Callahan was 62 years old and Kira was in her prime, but he was still faster than she expected, still more technical, still able to see openings she didn't know existed and exploit them before she could react. He caught her in submission after submission, swept her legs, locked her joints, put her in positions where she had to tap out or risk serious injury. and every time she tapped, he released immediately and helped her up. "You see the difference," he asked after the 10th submission, "between what I just did and what Donovan does? You stopped when I tapped." "Exactly. That's the line. That's what separates training from abuse, technique from cruelty, warriors from predators." He handed her a water bottle. "Donovan doesn't have that line anymore. Maybe he never did, and that makes him dangerous in a way that goes beyond just physical skill." Kira drank, caught her breath. "How do I beat him?" "You don't beat him with strength. He's bigger and stronger and meaner. You beat him with wisdom, with control, with understanding that every technique he knows I taught him, which means I know his habits, his tendencies, the holes in his game that he's never bothered to fix because most people can't exploit them." Callahan moved to the center of the mat. "Come at me, full speed, don't hold back." Kira attacked, fast and aggressive, using the explosive power she developed through years of SEAL training, but Callahan didn't try to match her strength. Instead, he moved like water, redirecting, absorbing, using her momentum against her. Within seconds, she was face down on the mat with his knee on her spine and his hand controlling her wrist. "That's how you beat Donovan," he said. "You make him commit, make him overextend. Then you capitalize on the opening. He's used to overpowering people, used to winning through intimidation and aggression. But against someone who knows how to read his energy, he's vulnerable." They trained until noon. By the end, Kira was exhausted but centered. Her body remembered movements she'd forgotten. Her mind understood principles she'd let slip away. And she felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. "Ready?" They sat against the wall, drinking water and letting their heart rates slow. "Donovan's going to challenge you," Callahan said. "Not officially, but he's going to engineer a situation where he can demonstrate that you're weak, incompetent, not worthy of investigating him. He'll do it in front of his students, make it look like a training demonstration, but it'll be a test. And if you fail, he wins. Your investigation loses credibility and he walks away clean." "When?" "Soon, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. He's not patient, he's not strategic, he's reactive. And you've got him reactive right now. So he's going to make a move, and when he does, you need to be ready to respond in a way that exposes him without destroying yourself." "You mean I can't kill him?" Callahan looked at her, really looked at her. "No, Kira, you can't, because you're not that person. Holden was different. That was self-defense. That was an immediate threat to an innocent person. This is different. This is about justice, about proving that the system can work if people are brave enough to make it work. If you kill Donovan, you become what he is, a warrior who let violence replace judgment. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to your father's memory." Kira closed her eyes, thought about the dog tags in her pocket, about the weight she carried every day, about the difference between justice and revenge. "Okay," she said, "so I don't kill him, but I do stop him." "Exactly. You stop him, decisively, publicly, in a way that demonstrates beyond any doubt that he's been lying about his abilities and his methods. You prove that his brutality isn't strength, it's weakness dressed up in tough guy rhetoric. And then the system does its job. Courts-martial, prison, dishonorable discharge. He loses everything. And more importantly, the message gets sent to every other instructor who thinks abuse is acceptable, that the old ways are over, that we're done protecting predators." Callahan stood, offered his hand, pulled her up. "Your father taught me something before he died. He said the strongest warriors aren't the ones who win every fight. They're the ones who know which fights are worth having. And this fight, Dylan Chambers, making sure no other kid dies like he did, this is worth having." Kira nodded. "Yeah, it is." They cleaned up, packed their bags, walked out into the California afternoon. "I'll be at Pendleton tomorrow," Callahan said. "Garrett's bringing me in officially as a martial arts consultant, which means I'll be there when Donovan makes his move. And Kira," he put his hand on her shoulder, "you're ready. trust your training, trust your instincts, and remember that wisdom isn't the absence of strength, it's the mastery of it. She watched him drive away. Then she sat in her car for a long time, thinking about what was coming, about facing Donovan, about proving that control mattered more than chaos, about honoring her father's memory by building something better instead of just destroying something broken. Her phone buzzed, text from Webb. Word is Donovan's organizing a demonstration tomorrow. Bay 3, 1500 hours. He's telling everyone that he's going to put the Navy investigator in her place. Show everyone that you're not qualified to judge Marine training. Kira stared at the message. There it was, the challenge, the trap, the moment where everything would be decided. She texted back, "I'll be there." Then she drove back to Pendleton, spent the evening writing her report, documenting everything she'd found, every injury, every witness statement, every piece of evidence that pointed to Donovan's guilt. If something happened to her tomorrow, at least the truth would survive. At midnight, she pulled out her father's letter one more time. Read the words that had guided her through every dark moment of her life. Strength without wisdom destroys. I need you to remember that forever. Tomorrow she'd remember. Tomorrow she'd prove it. What happens when a predator finally meets someone who can't be intimidated? Bay 3 was packed. Word had spread through the base like wildfire. Navy commander, Donovan, public demonstration. Marines filled the gallery seats, stood along the walls, crammed into every available space. Some came to support Donovan. Some came hopping to see him taken down. All came because they knew they were about to witness something that would become base legend one way or another. Kira arrived at 1450, wearing her PT uniform, hair pulled back, face calm. She walked through the crowd without looking at anyone, without acknowledging the whispers and the pointing and the betting that was already happening. Donovan stood in the center of the mat, wearing his gi, black belt around his waist, looking like a god of war in his element, surrounded by his students, his loyalists, the Marines who'd learned that survival meant allegiance to their instructor regardless of what that instructor did to earn their fear. Callahan was there too, standing in the corner, wearing civilian clothes and a Master Chief's calm. Garrett stood next to him, arms crossed, face grim, waiting to see how this would play out. "Commander Brennan." Donovan's voice boomed across the facility, amplified by acoustics designed to make instructors sound authoritative. "Thank you for joining us. I thought it would be beneficial for you to observe proper Marine Corps training. Since you're evaluating our methods, you should understand what real warriors look like in action." Kira stepped onto the mat. "I understand what real warriors look like, Sergeant. I've served alongside them for 15 years. Navy warriors, different standards, different expectations." Donovan smiled, predatory. "Marines are built differently, trained differently. We don't coddle weakness, we eliminate it." "Is that what you did to Dylan Chambers? Eliminated his weakness?" The crowd went silent. Someone in the back whistled, low, sharp, the sound of tension breaking. Donovan's smile didn't falter. "Chambers died in a training accident. The investigation is closed. The investigation is reopened, and I have testimony from witnesses who say you murdered him. Testimony from cowards who don't understand what it takes to make Marines. Testimony from warriors who understand the difference between training and abuse." Donovan took a step closer. "You want to talk about abuse? You want to question my methods? Then let's do this properly. Let's demonstrate what real training looks like. You and me, right here, right now. Let's see if Navy standards hold up against Marine Corps reality." This was the trap, the moment Callahan had warned her about. If she fought Donovan and lost, she looked weak. Her investigation lost credibility. Donovan walked away vindicated. But if she refused, she looked scared. Looked like she was hiding behind rank instead of backing up her accusations with action. There was no good option, except one. the one Callahan had taught her. "Okay," Kira said, "but not like this. Not with you picking the terms and stacking the deck. If we're going to do this, we do it right. We do it under rules that prove skill instead of just brutality. I don't need rules to prove I'm better than you." "Then you won't mind agreeing to them." Kira turned to Callahan. "Master Chief, would you officiate?" Callahan stepped forward, looked at Donovan. "You trained under me, you know I'm fair, you want to prove you're the better martial artist. Do it properly, traditional rules. First to submit or tap out. No strikes after a tap. No continuing after a stoppage. Clean, technical, honorable." Donovan's jaw tightened. He didn't want rules, didn't want structure. Wanted chaos where he could hurt Kira and justify it as demonstration. But with Callahan officiating and the whole base watching, he couldn't refuse without looking like he was afraid of a fair fight. "Fine," he said, "traditional rules. But when I make you tap, when I prove you're not qualified to be here, you withdraw your investigation. You admit you were wrong, and you leave Pendleton." "Deal," Kira said. "And when you tap, you confess to what you did to Dylan Chambers, on the record, in front of everyone here." "I'm not going to tap." "Then you have nothing to lose." They squared off. Callahan stood between them. "This is a demonstration of technical proficiency, not a street fight. You will follow my commands. You will respect the tap. You will conduct yourselves as martial artists, not thugs. Understood?" "Understood," Kira said. Donovan just smiled. "Bow to each other." They bowed, shallow, perfunctory, no respect in it, just the formality of tradition. "Hajam, begin." Donovan came at her like a freight train, aggressive, overwhelming, using his size and strength to close distance and drive her backward. He shot for a takedown, double leg, perfect technique. The kind of move that would put most people on their back instantly. But Kira wasn't most people. She sprawled, redirected his momentum, spun behind him and took his back, locked her hooks in, started working for a rear naked choke, the same submission Donovan had used to kill Dylan Chambers. Donovan powered out, pure strength. He bucked and rolled and managed to shake her off, stood up, breathing hard, his smile gone now, replaced by something darker. He'd expected to overwhelm her immediately, expected her to fold under his aggression. Instead, she'd nearly submitted him in the first 30 seconds. They circled each other. Donovan adjusted his strategy, became more technical, more careful, started using the skills Callahan had taught him instead of just relying on brute force. He feinted, set traps, tried to bait Kira into making mistakes he could exploit. But Kira had trained with Callahan that morning, knew Donovan's habits, knew his favorite combinations. Every move he made she'd already seen, already countered in practice. She moved like water around his attacks, absorbed his pressure, waited for the opening Callahan had promised would come. 3 minutes in, Donovan was frustrated, breathing harder, getting sloppy. He went for a guillotine choke, aggressive, overcommitted. Kira saw it coming, let him lock it in, let him think he had it. Then she stepped over, rolled through, ended up in mount position with Donovan flat on his back beneath her. The crowd erupted. Marines who'd been terrified of Donovan for years seeing him in a position they'd never thought possible, flat on his back, under control, vulnerable. Kira worked methodically, postured up, rained down controlled strikes that Donovan had to defend, forced him to give up his arms. Then she transitioned, smooth, technical, the way Callahan had shown her. She slid into an armbar, extended Donovan's arm, applied pressure to his elbow. He was trapped completely, his arm hyperextended, his options down to two, tap or let her break it. "Tap," Kira said, quiet, just loud enough for him to hear. "It's over." "No." She applied more pressure. His elbow bent in a way elbows weren't meant to bend. "Tap, Donovan, don't make me hurt you." "I won't tap to a woman." There it was, the truth beneath all his rhetoric about toughness and standards and training. He wasn't fighting to prove he was a better martial artist. He was fighting to prove his worldview. That men were stronger. That women didn't belong. That his way was the only way. Kira looked up at Callahan. Their eyes met, and she understood. This wasn't about winning. It was about teaching, about showing everyone watching that control mattered more than domination, that wisdom mattered more than ego. She released the armbar, let Donovan's arm go, stood up, stepped back. The crowd went silent, confused. She'd had him, had the submission locked in, had won. Why had she let him go? Donovan climbed to his feet, holding his elbow, breathing hard, looking at her with a mixture of confusion and rage. "What are you doing?" he said. "Giving you a choice," Kira said. "You can tap, admit what you did, face justice, or we can keep going, and next time I won't be so gentle. You think letting me go makes you better than me. No, it makes me different than you, because I know when to stop, you don't." Donovan charged, desperate, humiliated. He threw a wild punch, technically illegal under the rules they'd agreed to, but Callahan didn't stop the fight because this was the lesson. This was the demonstration everyone needed to see. Kira slipped the punch, caught his arm, used his momentum to throw him, clean judo technique. Donovan slammed into the mat, hard. The impact drove the air from his lungs. Before he could recover, Kira was on him again. This time she didn't go for a submission. She went for control, full mount, pinning his arms, immobilizing him completely. She leaned close, whispered in his ear. Dylan Chambers tapped. You didn't let him go. You kept squeezing until you heard his neck snap. You murdered him because he wouldn't submit to you, because he stood up to you, because he reminded you that strength without honor is just cruelty. Donovan's face went red. Get off me. Tap. Never. Then we stay here, all day if we have to, with everyone watching, with everyone seeing that the tough guy who broke a kid's neck can't even handle a Navy commander half his size. Tears of rage and humiliation started running down Donovan's face. His body shook, not with effort, with the recognition that he'd lost, that his entire identity had been shattered in front of everyone he'd spent 23 years trying to dominate. Tap, Kira said again, gentle now, almost kind. It's over, time to face what you did. Donovan's hand moved slowly, trembling. He tapped 3 times on the mat. Callahan stepped in. Mat, stop. Match concluded. Winner, Lieutenant Commander Brennan. Kira stood up, offered Donovan her hand. He looked at it, at her, at all the Marines watching, and he took it, let her pull him to his feet. You're under arrest, Garrett said, stepping onto the mat. 2 MPs moved in, put cuffs on Donovan's wrists, read him his rights. Donovan didn't resist, didn't fight. He just looked at Kira with something that might have been respect or might have been hate. Hard to tell, maybe both. How, he asked, how did you know my moves? Because Master Chief Callahan taught them to you, and then he taught me how to beat them, because that's what real teachers do. They don't create warriors who destroy, they create warriors who protect. Donovan was led away. The crowd dispersed slowly, Marines talking in hushed voices, trying to process what they'd just seen, trying to understand that the instructor they'd feared for years had been taken down by someone who'd beaten him with control instead of chaos. Kira stood alone on the mat, her body aching, her mind exhausted, but her heart lighter than it had been in 3 years. Callahan approached, put his hand on her shoulder. Your father would be so damn proud. Yeah, you proved what he always believed. That strength without wisdom destroys, but strength with wisdom builds. You just built something better than revenge. You built justice. Garrett joined them. The confession, that little whisper, you got it on record. Kira pulled out her phone, showed him the recording app. Every word. Good, we'll need it for the courts-martial, along with Webb's testimony and the physical evidence. Donovan's done. He'll never hurt another Marine. What about the system that protected him? Garrett's face hardened. That ends too. I'm recommending a complete overhaul of training protocols, independent oversight, mandatory reporting, zero tolerance for abuse. Dylan Chambers is going to save more lives dead than most warriors save alive. They walked out together, into the California evening, the sun setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Kira thought about her father's letter, about the words she'd carried for 33 years, about the lesson she'd finally learned. Strength without wisdom destroys, strength with wisdom builds. She'd built something today, built justice, built accountability, built a memorial to a 19-year-old kid who tried to be a hero and died for it. But his death hadn't been meaningless. Because of Dylan Chambers, the system would change. Because of his sacrifice, other Marines would train safely, would learn from instructors who understood that discipline didn't mean domination and strength didn't mean cruelty. 3 months later, Kira stood at the dedication ceremony for the Chambers Memorial Training Center, the facility where Dylan had died, now renamed in his honor, where new protocols emphasized control over chaos, where instructors were taught that the strongest warriors were the ones who knew when not to fight. Callahan gave the dedication speech. Webb stood beside her, and somewhere, Dylan Chambers' father watched with tears in his eyes as his son's name was honored instead of forgotten. Sometimes, Callahan said, dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Dylan Chambers acted with dignity every day of his life. He stood up to a bully, protected the weak, refused to compromise his values even when it cost him everything. That's not weakness. That's the strongest kind of strength there is. The crowd applauded, the ceremony ended, but the work continued. Kira stayed on at Pendleton for another 6 months, training instructors, implementing new protocols, building the system Dylan had died trying to change. And every morning before dawn, she pulled out her father's letter and read the words that had guided her through the darkness. Build something that lasts, Kira. Build something I'd be proud of. She had, finally, she had built something worth the sacrifice, something that honored the dead by protecting the living, something that proved warriors could be strong and wise, powerful and restrained, capable of violence but committed to justice. The Pacific wind whispered through the training center, carrying promises to warriors yet unborn, carrying the legacy of a 19-year-old kid who'd refused to break, carrying the wisdom of a father who died protecting his wingman and a daughter who'd learned to protect an entire generation. And in that difference lived the future of warfare itself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.